Hello, Average Pundits faithful. It's your host, Reese Williams here. And before we get underway with this podcast, I'd just like to give a bit of a shout out to the person that actually helped come up with the idea for this podcast episode, and actually give a charity shout out to Tony Williams, who is actually, you might recognize the last name is the same, is actually my father, and he has given us the idea to do this podcast on COVID-19 and should they be stricter on rules and what should happen in case the Premier League gets cancelled. And this is where the shout out comes in. Tony, my dad, is doing a 26-mile January marathon for prostate cancer. The aim for this is to run as far as he can, the 26 miles through January. He's been on this weight loss journey for a couple of months now, and he's been really good, and he's been working really hard. So this has been a big task for him, and it would be really good for you guys to go and donate to his cause for prostate cancer. He is 8 miles down at the moment, and he's just surpassed the £275 raised mark, so which is a monumental fee. Make sure that you guys go and check that out in the description down below, and make sure that you leave a nice little donation. Not everything, not a big amount to ask for, but any small change or anything that you can spare for a good cause of prostate cancer would mean the world to not only him but to me as well. Hopefully you guys enjoy this podcast, and hopefully you enjoy my little guest that I've got for you. Hello guys, and welcome back to the Average Pundits podcast, your home for all things Premier League. And it's been quite a while since I've done that intro. As you see, I am not joined by Joe this week. Hopefully he's somewhere watching this or listening to this, and I hope that he is well. But I've filled the void with a phenomenal guest, as I always do. It's Jacob Tanswell. How are you doing, Jacob?
I'm very well, thanks, mate. I wouldn't say I'm phenomenal, but great to be here.
Well, for those that aren't really familiar with some of the work that you've done, kind of describe to the average pundits faithful, the work that you've done, who you've worked with, and the stuff that you do outside of in your little bubble.
So basically, I'm mainly a writer. I write football, cricket, boxing. I'm now fortunate enough to be the Southampton correspondent for a website where I get to go to all the Southampton games, which is fantastic. And I do a little bit with Total Sport, as you already know, and you're part of as well.
Exactly. Yeah, we've worked a couple of times on Total Sport. So for those that haven't checked out Total Sport yet, make sure you go and check that out as well. But yeah, where can people find you on Twitter for all of your insights?
Yeah, they're not the greatest insights, but on Twitter it's J_Tanswell.
Or if you can't bother to type that in on Twitter, the link's down in the description. And before we get into this podcast, there's a counter above. If you are on YouTube, make sure you are subscribed to The Average Pundits, and go and follow us on social media, which will also be in the description down below. And as you can tell by the title of this podcast, whether you're on Apple Music, whether you're on Spotify, or whether you're on YouTube, you would have seen the thumbnail. And it's related about COVID-19 and the pandemic and everything that's going on with that. And I think with the cases rising, especially in the Premier League at the moment, there has been the news that 36 new cases in the latest testing cycle. Now, how uncontrollable is this virus getting within the Premier League parameters?
I think it's obviously an issue in society, but especially in Premier League right now. I think you see the cases, they've jumped a lot. Obviously, it's a little bit down from last week, which hopefully we're going to see a kind of pattern. But I think a lot of it's got to do with the Christmas New Year period, where a lot of footballers unfortunately went out mixed, socialised, and now teams are now paying the price. And I think Premier League has to be more stringent. I'm sure we'll come on to the what the reprimands will be, but yeah, it's an issue, but it's one that needs figuring out quickly.
And just to put it into a perspective for the UK as well, like, I mean, I'm sure there are problems all across the world, but for the UK, there have been we just hit the unfortunate milestone of 80,000 deaths. The infection rate is at its highest since the since the last lot of high infection rates. This new wave and this new variant of COVID, that the strand that started in the UK, and more players are getting infected. I mean, when really was the first time that we actually started taking it seriously in the football world? Was it Arteta?
That was when because the games were still going to go ahead that weekend, weren't they? And it was only called off at the Friday before the Saturday game that people thought, oh right, okay, it's actually affecting football now. We need to stop this quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And we were all, ready. I think fans were still kind of in the stadiums as well. I think Liverpool had just almost not won. I think I think, was it Southampton maybe?
Yes, I think it was actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Milner cleared it off the line the game before everything shut down, and yeah, that was a very unfortunate game for you, anyways. But this brings into light, the players that are being semi irresponsible. Should the Premier League be a bit more stricter on those players? I mean, for example, Carl Walker, he broke the COVID rules, and straight away, City players, I think it was eight Manchester City players, got the virus and were not able to play, or it was spread around the club. And I think their game against Everton got postponed as well. So, do you reckon that the Premier League should be a bit stricter on these players?
it was Mendy as well, wasn't it? The other fullback who was going
Mm,
out as well. I think he's
yeah.
done it a few times, like Walker. But I'm surprised that when Project Restart begun, there wasn't this type of right. If a player is mixing or is doing something unlawfully, then they should have this fine. There's no type of, I don't know, list saying, or like the FA are kind of, they've not even made any set of rules up. And I thought that would have been a case from the start. And now with cases going up, obviously in the winter, we all knew that there was going to be a spike in cases. I'm sure the Premier League should have planned ahead, and they should have set a parameter saying, right, if you do this, you can't, there's a suspension, there's a fine. Something's got to be strict. It can't just be a £3,000-4,000 because players don't care. I remember only a couple of weeks ago, Crystal Palace, Luka Milojevic, he went out New Year's Eve, I think, with Mitrovic, and he was still the captain for the next game. And Roy Hodgson, he's talked a lot about the NHS and how much we need to protect the NHS, and yet he's still giving the captain's armband to a guy that's broke the rules. Hodgson's 74 himself; he's vulnerable to it. So I don't think that's setting a very good example at all.
No, it's not. And like you say, they're getting charged what, £5,000. That's I mean, that's pennies to someone like Carl Walker, who's on a monstrous wage, and Benjamin Mendy as well. Like it's pennies to some of these players. I mean, some of the lower clubs like Sheffield United and Fulham don't have. Well, I'd say Fulham. Fulham are owned by the Khans, but Sheffield United. They don't have as much of a backing as Manchester City, who can spend 150 grand a week on a fullback. And these, they are pennies, and it's like, as you say, there should be a list of the amount of cases that are going up, and the point where it reaches, that the stricter that the rules and punishment should get. It's as if like they're very hesitant to punish their players because they're scared that they're going to take contracts in other leagues and make them less money.
Well, Guardiola, for example, who's had to deal with these two players. It's kind of like a catch-22 for him. He can't be too critical, and because the harshest punishment, I would probably agree, is throw them out. They broke the rules not once, twice. Carl Walker's case 3 times. That's seriously, you could be sacked for that in other professions, especially if you spread a potential disease this bad. It's just so, but managers won't do this though, will they? Because they obviously are selfish. They've got vested interest, and the right to be in ways. But there needs to be a higher power, like the Premier League, like the FA, like the PFA, who decide the rules. Guardiola, or any manager, they're not going to decide the rules because they want their best players available.
Exactly, and some teams are still carrying on without their best players, but then it does get to a point where these games are being called off, like the Fulham versus Spurs game. Got called off the day before, was it, or was it a couple of hours?
A couple of hours, I think.
Yeah, I think Jose was had a press conference. I think it was either today or yesterday, and he was like, "Oh, is it unfair on Fulham to be preparing for Wednesday?" It's like, well, no, because he had to stop his preparations for the game in a couple of hours. So I think there needs to be a bit of a structure. Like, yeah, the Premier League couldn't plan for the pandemic.
no one could plan for the pandemic. But surely after a couple of months, the Premier League could have had this massive meeting, set a bunch of parameters, and be like, okay, this is our rules. We're not going to stir from these. Everyone's going to get treated equally. And if anyone does break the rules, these are what we have in place. And if the cases get too much, this is what we're going to have to do. Speaking of, what should the course of action be for the Premier League?
Well, we've already spoke about it can't be money, because for some players they will literally happily play it and then break the rules again. It's got to be something. Suspensions. I'm not talking 1 or 2 games. It's got to be 5, 6. An impact that's really going to dent not only their the player but the club as well. Sacking, what we've said, but that's obviously the most extreme. But it's got to be a way of having these rules in place. Before Project Restart begun, from March to when was it, June? Premier League had all that time to sort out the parameters, like you say. And I'm just really, really shocked that they're now kind of making up as they go along.
Yeah, and like with all these games being cancelled, like the Spurs are getting ready to play. Well, at the time of this recording going out, they're playing today, or on the Wednesday. The cases are spiking. Could we see the league being either postponed or cancelled again?
I've been thinking about that last week or so. I think it's a point of concern. But what you've got to remember is that the Premier League, especially if the rules are followed, training grounds are probably the safest place to be right now. They get tested. I think the test has gone up 2 to 3 times a week. Temperature checks. I think they still observe the social distancing very stringently away from the training pitch. And what you've got to remember is that this country is really in danger of not having any type of joy. And the Premier League, not only obviously for money and to fulfill television contracts, but it also gives people, especially the public, something to look forward to. And I think that's really important in keeping people's morale up and making sure they observe social distancing. Because if there's no Premier League or nothing to look forward to, they're going to go stir crazy. And then eventually something's going to snap either way, isn't it? Whether they break social distancing or they do something worse.
I mean, being a representative for Southampton, for a company, what do you feel like the job of the reporter is going to be if that does come into a course of action? Do you kind of fear that you're going to have to be like sitting without anything to do, twiddling your thumbs and just not doing much, because that's kind of what you aspire to do?
You've got to be creative, haven't you? I think there's always going to be articles you can write, especially whilst you wait for football to resume. But it just, let's be honest here, everything's a mess. And you see on Twitter, social media, no one's really sure what's going on. The government, the decisions are changing every day. So that's a little bit, it spreads confusion. But in terms of writing and stuff, it's going to be more difficult to write up-to-date reports. So you've got to be a little bit more creative. You've got to think of maybe it's a throwback article from the team from 10 years ago. It's going to be different. And obviously you can't speak to the managers as much now, can you? So you can't get articles out of that either.
Exactly. And we've kind of mentioned there needs to be like a proper body of like the Premier League, right? There needs to be a huge like collective rule setting motive from the Premier League. Do you think that there should be like a weekly meeting discussing like, oh yeah, Carl Walker and everyone's COVID cases come into one meeting and be like, okay, what do we do about this? And there's like a vote weekly. Or do you think that would be too unfair on certain teams that have less power?
I think they just need to establish rules from the get-go. I think if you keep doing a case-by-case basis, then you want to always be subjected to thinking, hold on, that player did that, but he got a worse punishment than the guy who did something similar. I think it's got to be the one rule for all. And I think I'm not sure they do already, but they do need to probably meet every week, just to have a look at and just make sure the Premier League can run as smoothly as possible right now.
Do you think that it would, say, if the fines were put up to maybe like a 50 grand fine, do you think that would be a bit unfair to those that are on smaller contracts that do it? Or do you think that that's a bigger incentive to not go that way if you are on a lower wage?
We're talking like Premier League players are, they're not earning anything, and 50 grand will wipe them out. I'm sure most of them players, they they can afford 50 grand like that. But if they can't, or if they are scared of 50,000, which I'd probably think it shouldn't really be fines, it should be suspensions as such, then don't break the rules in the first place. At the end of the day, if they break the rules, they're open to now getting fined heavily.
Exactly. I do think the suspensions are the way to go though, because a couple games can take a lot of a lot of players' game. Taking 5 or 6. I was watching a video on Wayne Rooney of Tifo, and someone was quoted on saying that if Rooney took 5 or 6 weeks out or 5 or 6 games away, it would take him numerous more games to get back to his full peak. That can do absolute wonders for a player. Like an aging player. If you look at Cavani, he just got a ban as well. He got a suspension. He's going to be coming back very soon. It could happen to him as well. Like a lot of these players, then they've just passed their physical peak, and they might not be able to run for a couple games after their suspension. So maybe the suspensions are the way to go.
It's going to cause harm to them, their form, but also the team. For example, I'll just use a Southampton example because I know if Danny Ings was found to break the rules and he got a 5 or 6 game ban, not only would it harm him, it would completely impact Southampton where they are in the league, their form, the mood around the club. And I'm not sure if they did get fined, not fined, but suspensions, would they still be able to train with the team? Would they be training away? Would they still be allowed at the club? All that you can even consider if you're setting the rules.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned in Southampton. I think we should, in worst case scenario, if the league does get postponed or cancelled, which teams will benefit and which teams will be hurt by this? I think we'll start with the league cancellation and who will benefit from this. I think we just got to look at the bottom of the table, really. I think who do you think is benefiting more from the league cancellation at the bottom?
Well, if the league got cancelled completely and they had to restart again, I think Sheffield United will be on their knees praying and thanking some higher power above. I think, the relegation sides, but also the likes of Arsenal, because they're mid-table now. They not only will they be able to start fresh, but they'll probably be able to sign some new players, reevaluate the squad, get rid of some dead wood. So that's them type of teams, especially scrabbling around the bottom. Newcastle are not sure what they're really doing with Steve Bruce. They're the type of teams that will think right, especially West Brom as well as Sam Allar does. He already wants a season called off, doesn't he? So they'll be thinking, come on then, cancel it and restart.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Steve Bruce. I don't even think he knows what's going on at bloody Newcastle. He's got no idea what is going on. But yeah, I do think you're right. I mean, I would put Arsenal in that relegation candidate spot anyways, because they're closer to the bottom than they are the top four. So I think they're sitting in 11th right now, which is a miracle because they were sitting in 15th for so long. Yeah, I would put Sheffield United, West Brom, I think Arsenal, Fulham as well. They haven't really had a great time of buying players. Like, as I mentioned before, they're owned by the Khans and they've got a lot of money, yet they can't seem to buy very many good players. I don't know what the problem is with their signings or their scouting, but it's been pretty poor.
They are like a yo-yo club, aren't they? Similar to you get them type of clubs with West Brom, Norwich, and they're unbelievable in the Championship. You think they've got players here that can just step up easily, and then they struggle. I think they kind of learned their lesson from the last time they got promoted because they brought in loads of just foreign overseas players that didn't quite gel. They kind of kept it a little bit more stable, but there's still the new signings haven't worked, and there's just no consistency there. And unfortunately, it looks like they'll probably go down again. But I'm sure, if me and you spoke this time next year, they'll be going back up again. So who knows?
Exactly. There'll be another Joey Ryan penalty save at your volley thing that goes in, and somehow Fulham come back up and they make some other random signings that no one's heard of. And also Alfonso Areola. I don't know how they managed to pull that off, but they must have pulled some strings somewhere. But it's the same with West Brom. They had one of the best centre backs in the championship last season in Ajayi. Mateus Pereira was unreal for them last season. They brought in Dean Garner from West Ham as well, and I mean it can't be the Steve Bruce effect because they drew with Liverpool. I mean, at the moment, it doesn't take much to get results out of Liverpool, does it? But I won't be too salty at that point.
No, you hit the nail on the head there. But when I look at West Brom, I saw from the Championship, they had players that I thought could easily step up into that Premier League. Ajayi, for example, Pereira. They look like players that could compete in a top 10, them type of players. But as a team, collectively, when you start losing games and you're not used to it, especially last year when you're used to being at the top end of the table, I don't know, confidence goes, patterns of play, just your rhythm of just winning games on the trot. And that probably makes you look a little bit worse than you actually are or what your skill suggests.
Exactly. And I think that this, that's kind of the segue that we need to move on to who will be hurt by the, potential league cancellation. And I think, to get the obvious ones out of the way, Liverpool, I think it would have hurt last year if it was cancelled way more because going for the first title. Now that that's out of the way, it wouldn't hurt as much. Manchester United, really, who are sitting in second at the moment, they are on their title surge, trying to get back to the promised land. I mean, how much would it hurt Ollie's confidence if the league was cancelled and they didn't finish in this top four?
I think it would hurt in some ways, but I think it's quite well known that Man United, they probably don't see themselves challenging just yet for the Premier League. They're there, but if you look at their form this season, they've been patchy, haven't they? And it's because they've got this unbelievable strike force who just need one chance and they'll score a goal. But if the season did get cancelled, and let's hope it really doesn't, but they've got funds now to probably dip into the market. They could think, right, we did get Sancho, we did get Grealish last summer, but now we've got a taste of what it's like without them this season. We're going to go get them, so they can strengthen, and I think they'll get better every season they go on. They look like they're building a team there slowly but surely. So that, although it'd be a disappointment, I don't think they've probably got the legs to mount this title charge.
And sitting just behind them, Leicester, who have sold Manchester United a striker, not a striker, a centre back who doesn't seem to be performing as much as his price tag would tell you, in Harry Maguire, and they replaced him with some unbelievable centre backs. I mean, Johnny Evans has been playing well, Soyuncu's amazing, and Wesley Fofana as well, who's been really impressive. So I think, I mean, would it hurt Leicester more than a Manchester United to be like, oh yeah, we're going to cancel the league, there goes all of your momentum? And that also loses a lot of months of Jamie Vardy, who is an aging striker.
Yeah, you're right, because Man United have probably got far more resources to strengthen again. Where you look at Leicester, they're probably going to keep the nucleus of the team, and they'll strengthen a few areas. But other teams that are around them, like Chelsea, Arsenal, maybe Tottenham, they're going to keep strengthening, and the difference in resources is going to get even bigger next year. So Leicester, this is the time where Leicester have to capitalise on their good form, their settled team. Everyone else is kind of in transition at the moment. Leicester have been there with Brendan Rodgers for a good 2 years, and if they're going to get Champions League, it has to be this season. So it's definitely going to hurt them more than United.
And just behind them is Spurs in fifth, and I mean, they kind of have their sort of, they're kind of having a resurgence. They brought in Reguilon, who's a really young, good player. I mean, they've got the buyback clause with Real Madrid, which is a bit annoying, but if they decide to buy him back, they decide to buy him back. And I think if the league gets cancelled, the big story is it's going to be looking towards Gareth Bale and how much of a flop he was. I mean, he hasn't lit the Premier League on fire and all sorts, and it's kind of been a massive disappointment to see Bale, especially if the league gets cancelled.
This doesn't get spoken about enough. I think Gareth Bale is, I've never seen a decline quite as dramatic as Gareth Bale in recent years. You even look at him now, he just looks a completely different player to when he left. He doesn't take anyone on anymore. I'm not sure what he is. Is he this number 10 that floats around with his left foot and doesn't really do much, like a Mesut Ozil? I just want to see him, roll the years back, rewind the clock, take players on. But I don't see it. I don't think he's got that anymore. And for the wages he must be on, I'm sure Tottenham aren't paying at all. He has done absolutely next to nothing. I don't think Jose Mourinho really wanted him. It was more the chairman, wasn't it? And I think unless Bale can somehow find this form, it's going to be a very expensive mistake.
Oh yeah, definitely. That they up. You say that they're probably not paying all of them, but they're definitely paying the majority of his wages because Real Madrid would have, would have been like, no, we'll make you pay 80% of them. Don't worry. But yeah, Bale has come. He was unhappy at Real Madrid. Yet he was scoring bicycle kicks in Champions League finals, and yes, it was against a concussed keeper, but yeah, he was on top of the world again. And comes to England, back to England. The stories there is written in the stars for him to have this breakout season. And you're right, you don't see him breaking past defenders. You don't see his El Clasico run anymore, because the Premier League is completely different to when he left. I mean, do you think it's the injuries that have haunted him through most of his career at the moment?
I think it's a combination of things. It's the injuries because he spell out the team of Real Madrid. He's not really played much, has he? If you look for the last 3-4 years, he's either been out because of falling out with Zidane, injured, playing too much golf, his haircut. I'll never see a period with Gareth Bale where I think he's had a really good 2 months. He has spells, a good game, but then you won't see him for another couple of games. So I think that's really cost him his prime years in a way. And injuries, of course, for a guy who's so athletic and so powerful like Bale, every injury is just going to slow you down a little bit, isn't it? And I think that's probably, now that's the amalgamation of everything what we're seeing at Spurs right now.
And Bale, his rise to where he is now is pretty incredible. From from looking at where he is now, from where he came from, and that's kind of where we're going to go to as well. That's a pretty nice segue to the next and probably last team that would definitely be hurt from a league cancellation, and something that's a team that you're most definitely an expert on is Southampton, who are having one of their best seasons in the Premier League to date.
I think of all the teams, I might be a bit biased. I think it's going to hurt Southampton the most out of any team, because if you look at the teams around Southampton, the difference in resources, even players, it's just a joke. And it's only because you've got, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best manager or coach in the league, who can extract every single ounce of talent out of these players, that they're even there. And if the league got cancelled, Southampton would fall away. That's another year left without another year gone of Ralph Hasenhüttl, because he's going to be going, hopefully not too soon, but in the future. And other teams are just going to strengthen. And Southampton are always swimming against a tide. But this year, you think, right, maybe they can just keep it up this year. But if this league gets cancelled and all their efforts, you see they give absolutely everything, every single game. You saw that, the Liverpool game. And if it was all for nothing, then I think it could really cause a psychological block to them.
I think it would go back to more of the psyche of Hasenhüttl as well, because not only did he, he's come back. The comeback story of Hasenhüttl from that 9-0 defeat at Leicester, and everything that came with that, it was just such a heartbreaking moment for him. And to come back and beat the champions of England, multiple time European champions, Jurgen Klopp, who is arguably one of the best managers in the world. And to see him break down at the end of the game is kind of bittersweet. I'm guessing it was bittersweet for you as a Southampton fan as well.
I was there. As soon as I saw the whistle blew and I saw him collapse his knees, I thought he was just exhausted. But then I saw his crying. I think that got all people connected to Southampton a little bit emotional, because you talk about the 9-0, and I'm sure Southampton fans hate hearing that, because now Southampton fans are even playing a game. Every time they're on TV, they guess the minute where the commentator is going to mention the 9-0 defeat. I think that team has been banished. They beat Leicester probably 3 months after that. People need to forget about that result now. Okay, that was 9-0. Most supporters, I think people forget this. Even after the 9-0, supporters leaving the ground, they weren't blaming Hasenhüttl. They weren't saying Ralph's got to go. They were blaming the players. They were the same players under Pellegrino, Puel, Mark Hughes. They were not good enough. Everyone saw them terrible. They thought Vestergaard, rubbish. Ward-Prowse, rubbish. Danny Ings, injury prone. Get rid of him. And it's the players that they wanted out, not Hasenhüttl. But for the turnaround, just the players and the coaching staff, what they've done is incredible. And you just hope they can just get a league position this season that really pays tribute to how much work they've progressed.
I mean, which players do you think that is going to hurt as well? Because you've had some players that have played absolutely unreal this season. I mean, there's a midfield duo that have been out of their skin. I mean, there's been a certain midfielder from Southampton that's been lighting the world on fire with his set pieces. I mean, it's going to hurt a striker. It's going to hurt a couple of defenders. Who do you think are the key players that it's going to hurt more?
I think you've probably got to look at the older players on the team, because like the likes of Ryan Bertrand, he doesn't get spoken enough about in any Premier League circle. He's consistently for the last 6-7 years. I'm doing an article on him actually, speaking to other players about him, because I don't feel he gets anywhere near the praise he should. Against Liverpool, everyone talked about Kyle Walker-Peters and his handle of Mane. Yeah, he's superb. But what about Ryan Bertrand on the other side against Salah? Bertrand, he might have lost a yard of pace, and you're probably going to see that, if this season gets cancelled and into next year. But he's so wise and clever with his positioning that he's one of the most consistent performers in the Southampton team, but he never gets spoken about. And you just fear if this season does get cancelled, you just think, how many years has he really got left at the top level?
Yeah, and Ryan Bertrand is a really good player when you look at it. I mean, there are certain games that he has played that he might not have been up to par, but this season I think he's been probably one of the best wing backs in the league. I mean, if Robertson hadn't had such a good year and been one of the best Liverpool players at this point, I think it could be a team of the season so far shout for for Bertrand.
He's all seriously, in all the seasons where Southampton were terrible and they were struggling around the bottom, Bertrand was always the one where you thought, right, you're doing your self justice. Everyone else, they're performing terribly, but you're still there. And I think he got in the PFA Team of the Year under Koeman in the first season, I remember, and that was the only time where you thought people were praising him. I think he got banished from the England side too early, especially when you saw last or a couple of international breaks they played Kieran Trippier left back. And that blew my mind. I might be a little bit biased, as I say, but Ryan Bertrand is excellent, and his contract runs out at the end of this season. So it's a matter of urgency for Bertrand and Danny Ings. They both get their contracts tied down.
Oh, I mean, that would be a huge loss for Southampton. I mean, seeing Bertrand leave is like you're gonna have to get someone in really quickly. But someone who's also had like a really breakout year and kind of a resurgence is Theo Walcott, who is, he's not getting any slower, but he's still, probably rapid. I mean, how important is it for the season to continue for someone like Theo Walcott?
Yeah, he's a very good example. You also don't go back to your old club like Gareth Bale with Spurs, but for Walcott, it just seems like the perfect fit. He's got the energy still. He's still very quick. I was quite shocked when I saw him how he still got that pace. He's perfect for the way Southampton do play. He looks hungry again. I think he looks re-energized. He's always smiling. He's always talking after the game. He's the first one out, and he just looks like he wants to be there, and that's really good to see. And I think Walcott, we've always seen that his end product's not the best. Let's be honest, but in terms of his work off the ball, I know it might sound a bit patronising. He's so important to the team. And in terms of just squad depth as well, you saw when Danny Ings got injured, Walcott went up front, no problem. He can do that as well. He brings the experience to a team that is very, very young in terms of winning games and having the Premier League experience.
It's weird to hear that Theo Walcott's got the experience, because everyone, when you think of Theo Walcott, you kind of think back to the young Theo Walcott who had all the buzz, all the pace, and it's weird to think that Theo Walcott's now a veteran of the Premier League.
He's been in there for 14 seasons or something in the Premier League, and I just thought that's mad.
That blows my mind, because you always think back to the 16-year-old who's just been scouted to try and go for the England squad at a World Cup but doesn't actually get played. I mean, Walcott coming back to the club is amazing. He's in amazing form. Who do you think that it wouldn't necessarily hurt for them to be gone from the Southampton team after this season? You're trying to shift some of the deadwood.
Right now, you've probably got to look at the starting 11. That obviously picks itself. You can't get rid of any of them. But then you look at the players that are on the periphery. Southampton are trying to get some fullbacks in, because if Walker-Peters or Bertrand do get injured, there is nothing. Ward-Prowse will probably have to go fullback, I think. And it's clear that Harsington doesn't trust Jan Valery anymore, so he could be on his way. There's still a 3 goalkeeper situation: Angus Gunn, Alex McCarthy, and Fraser Forster. At least one of them's got to go. And then you look at the strike force. Michael Obafemi, he's 18 when he made his debut against Man United. He has done very little. He might have to go. Shane Long, Southampton fans loved him for a while. Not really doing much now. Doesn't really get on. I think he could be one of them that might have to leave at the end of this year if the club do want to get some money for him.
I mean, for me, Shane Long is for some reason he's like a meme favorite. I have a friend who's a West Brom fan, and he always just used to be known as the drunken Irish guy who plays for West Bromwich Albion. As soon as he went to Southampton, I was like, oh, this is great. He can leap like a salmon. And he was really fast. He was quick, and like you said, he was adored by Southampton fans for a while. And he was a good player, and he just seems to have dropped off like just so badly. Like he doesn't have that edge on him anymore, and he's really been replaced by Che Adams a lot. And I think that Che Adams has come into his own this season a lot as well.
I think, everyone says about striker they just need a goal, but since he scored against Man City, he just looks a completely different player. Before that, he couldn't even keep his footing in games. It'll be a miracle if he kept the ball without slipping over. Now, his hold-up play is excellent. He provides completely different to any other striker. He can bring it. He can link the play. He's got like 4 or 5 assists this season. Works superb with Danny Ings. So he's been a revelation, really. I think last January, Leeds wanted him on loan, and a lot of Southampton fans probably thought, you know what, you can go. You've not been very good, but in hindsight, that would have been just absolute madness if he went. He's been that good.
Exactly, and I think that this whole Southampton team has been phenomenal this season. And I mean, as a fan, being able to go to these games as a reporter and write about the team that you've always loved. How much of a rejuvenation is it to see where you've come from last season and finishing it? I mean, actually, you had a really good. To be fair, you've had a really good 2020 if you think about it.
I think in 2020 we've got third or fourth most amount of points. So it's not like people remember the 9-0 and they obviously thought we were relegation candidates, but probably since March maybe they were never even in a relegation fight. They finished 11th with 54 points, which is the most they got since Koeman. They've been really good for over a year now, and I don't think that really gets spoken about enough. But it is great to see. I think any supporter, they know they're not going to win every game, but to see them run like they do and show the amount of commitment they do. Against Liverpool, Jack Stevens, who's not even, probably third, fourth choice centre back, he's blocking every single shot. It's great to see that all these players are giving it absolutely everything throughout the 90 minutes.
And of course, it had to be Danny Ings that scored that goal, didn't it? I'm still bitter. I was like, I saw the goal went in, and I saw it was Danny Ings. I just went, of course it is. Of course it's Danny Ings. I think that I was saying for ages that we should have had Danny Ings back because Firmino was just doing absolutely nothing. But
I'm a big advocate. I think it's unbelievable that Roberto Firmino gets rated higher than Danny Ings. I think Danny Ings does everything Firmino does, pressing, link-up play, but he actually scores goals as well now in an obviously a worse team.
Yeah, exactly. And he was in the running for the Golden Boot. So I don't know.
He would have got it. If he took penalties, he would have got the Golden Boot.
Yeah, exactly. Vardy took it because he does take penalties. It's like Bruno Fernandes scores so many goals because of his penalties. But I'll leave that one for the Manchester United fans to argue with me about that one. But yeah, I think that we should sort of round out the podcast on what are your thoughts that the Premier League should do. Whether do you think that there should be like a mini circuit breaker to like sort of help the cases go down?
I think if you have a circuit breaker, you're in real danger of it never restarting again. I think the Premier League will obviously it's becoming a lot more stringent. They're going to have to close ranks a lot more. Really remind these players that they've got a job to do here and they stay indoors as much as they can, go to training, etc. But even if the cases do go up, I think there's a way of just you have to manage it because football is a necessity to most people's lives. And I'm not. Hopefully, that we know deaths because of Premier League squads, but that is one of the most important things now. And if they were to have a circuit break and cancel the season, that would be catastrophic to a lot of teams' finances as well as the public's morale.
Definitely, and I think the Premier League, if it was to go, there wouldn't be a lot on. I mean, would be again twiddling our thumbs, doing not a lot because that's what's the majority of our entertainment at the moment. And I think to see that go, I mean, for you not to be able to go to the games and report and speak to the players and the manager, I think that would have a quite a bit of a halt on your career opportunities and your expectations of yourself going forward as well.
For sure, I think every time you go there, you just feel you get a little bit more confident. You're writing a lot more. You get more eyes on your reports, your articles, your pieces, and that would obviously mean a halt to it. But this obviously you still can do a lot. You can still keep working if you want to.
Definitely. So yeah, thank you guys for listening to this podcast. Jacob, it's been an absolute pleasure for you to be on this podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, mate. Honestly, I've really enjoyed it.
Definitely, and you'll have to come back on. It's your first appearance, which is I'm quite shocked at, to be honest. After working with you on Total Sports. So yeah, you know what? Let's do this again sometime.
Hopefully, it won't be too long this time.
Oh, absolutely. If you are new around here, please subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification bell as well. Like the video and share it around with anybody that you think will like the Premier League or football or stuff like that. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, go and follow us on there. Follow us on social media as well. Our Instagram is the Pundits, Average Pundits. I get these the wrong way around, Jacob. I'm absolutely poor for it. And our Twitter is Pundits Average. There you go. So make sure you go and follow us on there. And on Facebook, it's also the Average Pundits too. And yeah, make sure you are subscribed, notification bell on, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time.